The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and furniture polish. It was a smell Clara associated with finality. She sat on a leather chair that was too big for her, its cold surface a stark contrast to the humid grief that clung to her skin. She was 19. A week ago, she had a grandmother. She had a room. She had something that felt, if not like a home, then at least like a place to be. Now she had nothing. Across the polished mahogany desk, her Aunt Susan sorted papers with a crisp, impatient rustle. Susan had not cried at the funeral. Her face was a mask of strained propriety, her grief expressed only as a deep annoyance with the inconvenience of it all. "It's all quite straightforward," Susan said, not looking at Clara. Her voice was as smooth and hard as the stones in the cemetery. "My sister, your grandmother, had very little left. The medical bills, you understand." Clara understood nothing except the cavernous emptiness where her grandmother used to be. The house was mortgaged. It will have to be sold to cover the debts. The house where Clara had spent every summer. The house with the crooked porch swing and the smell of baking bread. Gone. Maeve's personal effects are, well, mostly sentimental. A delicate wave of a hand dismissed a lifetime of collected treasures. "Of course, we will handle the disposal of all that." "We." The word was a wall. Susan and her husband, Uncle Robert, were on one side. Clara was on the other. Clara said nothing. Her voice was a stone in her throat. She had used it up, whispering goodbyes to the quiet, still form in the hospital bed. Uncle Robert, who had been standing by the window pretending to be interested in the traffic, cleared his throat. "There is the matter of your things, Clara." Her things. A duffel bag of clothes, a box of books, a framed photograph of her and her grandmother laughing on a beach. They were already packed, sitting by the door of the guest room in Susan's immaculate, silent house, a house where Clara had been staying for 6 days and had never felt less welcome. "We need the room," Susan said, finally meeting Clara's eyes. There was no apology in her gaze, just a flat, unyielding statement of fact. "Mark is coming home from college for the summer." Clara stared at the grain of the wooden desk. It swirled like a fingerprint. Unique, irreplaceable, like the woman they were erasing with paperwork. "So, where will I go?" The question came out as a whisper, small and frayed. Susan sighed, a puff of irritation. "Clara, you're an adult now. We can't be expected to—" "Well, we've done our part." Their part had been to endure her presence for less than a week. "Your grandmother did leave you something, however," the lawyer chimed in, sliding a single key across the desk. It was an old, tarnished automotive key, attached to a cracked plastic fob. Clara looked at it. "The 1978 Silverstream camper," Susan said, her tone dripping with a kind of pity that felt more like contempt. "It's been parked out at the old storage lot for a decade. Lord knows if it even runs." "Its assessed value is negligible," the lawyer added quickly. "Less than $500. As such, it passes to you directly, outside the main estate." A final insult, dressed as generosity. They took the house, the savings, the memories. They gave her the junk. Clara looked at the key. She remembered the camper, a big, silver-sided thing from her early childhood. Her grandfather, Thomas, had always been tinkering with it. He had died long ago, but the memory of him, smelling of sawdust and motor oil, was a warm spot in her cold history. Her grandmother, Maeve, had never had the heart to sell it. "She said it was your grandfather's folly," Susan said, a smirk playing on her lips. "Poured more money into that rusted heap than it was ever worth." Clara's fingers closed around the key. The metal was cool, solid. It was something to hold on to. She stood up. The movement was stiff, robotic. "Thank you," she said. The words tasted like ash. She took the key and walked out of the office, leaving the smell of polish and the rustle of papers behind her. She did not look back. The drive to the storage lot was a blur of traffic lights and storefronts. Clara's world had shrunk to the size of her small, beat-up car, a vehicle that was itself on its last legs. Her belongings were in the back, everything she owned in the world. The storage lot was on the edge of town, a desolate place of gravel and chain-link fences. A bored-looking man in a booth pointed her toward the back row. And there it was. It was worse than she remembered. The Silver Stream was a brand, but this thing was no longer silver. It was a streaky, oxidized gray, with angry patches of rust blooming along the seams. The tires were flat, cracked, and sinking into the gravel. A fine green moss grew in the shadow of the window frames. It looked like a beached whale, forgotten by the tide, a monument to decay. Susan's mocking voice echoed in her head, a rusted heap. Clara felt a fresh wave of despair, so sharp it almost buckled her knees. This was not a solution. This was a joke, a cruel, final punchline. She stood there for a long time, just looking. The sun beat down on the gravel, and the air smelled of hot asphalt and dust. Then she moved, one foot in front of the other. She walked the perimeter of the camper. Her hand trailed along the gritty aluminum skin. It was big, much bigger than she recalled. 31 feet of dereliction. She reached the door. The key she held was for the ignition, if it even had one anymore. The door itself had a simple handle and a lock. She tried the handle. It was stiff, but it turned. With a groan of protest, the door swung inward, scraping against the gravel. A wave of hot, stale air washed over her. It smelled of dust, of time, of mice. Clara hesitated on the threshold. She peered into the gloom. Then she stepped inside. The journey was slow. The old camper, once freed from the storage lot by a reluctant tow truck driver with a pitying smile, was not made for highways. Clara kept to the back roads, the blue highways on the worn-out map spread on the passenger seat. The engine, miraculously alive after a new battery and some starter fluid, complained with a litany of coughs and sputters. The whole rig shuddered over 45 miles per hour, so she drove at 40. She was headed west, toward the mountains of a state she'd only ever seen in pictures, toward a small town called Pine Ridge. Her grandmother had mentioned it once, a long time ago. "Your grandfather and I, we were happy there," Maeve had said, her voice soft with memory, "before the world got complicated." It was the only destination Clara could think of, a place where happiness had once lived. It felt like a pilgrimage. For 3 days, she drove. She slept in the camper at dusty, forgotten rest stops, the door wedged shut with a spare tire. She ate cold beans from a can and drank lukewarm water from a jug. The world outside the grimy windows was a watercolor wash of green fields and distant blue hills. She was utterly alone. And in that aloneness, a strange thing happened. The sharp edges of her grief began to soften. The constant, high-pitched ringing of panic in her ears subsided to a dull hum. There was only the road, the rumbling engine, the task at hand. Get to Pine Ridge. The final approach was a long, winding climb, up a road that seemed to shed its pavement inch by inch. The asphalt gave way to gravel, and the gravel to a rutted dirt track, flanked by towering pines. The trees were so thick they blotted out the sun, plunging the road into a perpetual twilight. The camper groaned and scraped its way up the incline. Finally, the trees parted. She crested a hill, and there it was. Pine Ridge wasn't so much a town as a clearing in the forest that had decided to put down roots. A single main street, with a handful of wooden storefronts, a gas station with an old-fashioned pump, a diner with a flickering neon sign that read, "The Landing." A plume of wood smoke rose from a stone chimney somewhere. The place felt 100 years old. It felt quiet. Clara pulled the camper into a gravel lot beside the diner, the only place big enough to hold it. She cut the engine. The sudden silence was immense, broken only by the chirping of birds and the sigh of the wind in the pines. She had made it. Now what? She sat in the driver's seat, her hands still gripping the wheel. She was tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that went beyond the long drive. For the first time in days, she took a good, long look at her inheritance. From the outside, it was a catastrophe. The rust was worse than she thought. The windows were clouded with grime. A long dent ran down one side, as if it had scraped against a bridge. It was an eyesore, a piece of junk, her aunt's words. With a sigh, she pushed herself out of the driver's seat and went into the main living area. The gloom was thick. The air was heavy. Everything was coated in a layer of dust that softened every edge. She ran a hand over the wall. It felt odd. Not the cheap, flimsy paneling she expected. It was wood, solid wood. Curious, she moved toward the back, to the small galley kitchen. The countertop was grimy, but when she wiped a section clean with the sleeve of her jacket, she saw it wasn't Formica. It was a single, thick slab of butcher block, its edge worn smooth by time. She opened a cabinet door. It didn't rattle on cheap hinges. It swung open smoothly, silently. She looked closer. The corners of the cabinet were not stapled together. They were dovetailed. Tiny, precise, interlocking joints that spoke of hours of patient labor. Her grandfather's work. Suddenly, she saw the place with new eyes. She started to look not at the dirt, but at the structure beneath it. The floor wasn't linoleum. It was hardwood. Narrow planks of oak, laid perfectly straight. Under the dust, she could see the warm glow of the grain. She moved through the small space, touching everything. The built-in dinette wasn't particle board. It was solid cherry. The frame of the fold-out sofa was maple. The small, rounded trim that lined the ceiling was carved by hand. She could see the faint, rhythmic marks of a sharp tool. Pererve. Everywhere she looked, she found the same thing. Hidden beneath a decade of neglect was a level of craftsmanship that was simply staggering. This wasn't a camper. It was a custom-built cabin on wheels. Her grandfather hadn't been pouring money into a rusted heap. He had been building a jewel box. A flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time sparked in her chest. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was smaller than that. It was curiosity, a sense of wonder. What else was hidden here? The question hung in the dusty air. "A thing isn't ruined," her grandfather used to say, his voice a low rumble as he worked a piece of wood in his small workshop. "It's just waiting for the right pair of hands." Clara looked at her own hands. They were smudged with grease from the journey, her nails broken. They weren't the right hands for anything. Were they? The smell of coffee and frying bacon pulled her from the camper. Her stomach rumbled, a sharp reminder that she hadn't eaten a real meal in days. The landing's neon sign blinked a friendly invitation. She took the $20 bill she had tucked away for emergencies, smoothed it out, and walked across the gravel lot. The diner was warm and bright. A long counter with red vinyl stools ran the length of the room. A few old men in flannel shirts sat nursing mugs of coffee, their conversation a low murmur. Behind the counter, a woman with a cloud of white hair and a kind, wrinkled face was wiping down the surface. She looked up as Clara entered, and her smile was immediate and genuine. "Well, hello there. Haven't seen you before. Come on in. Find a seat." Clara slid onto a stool at the far end of the counter, feeling awkward and out of place. "Coffee?" the woman asked. Clara nodded. "Please." The woman placed a thick ceramic mug in front of her and filled it from a glass pot. The coffee was black, strong and steaming. Clara wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into her cold fingers. "You're the one with the silver stream," the woman said. It wasn't a question. In a town this small, the arrival of a 31-foot camper was front-page news. "Yes," Clara said. "Haven't seen that old rig in years. Thought it was gone for good." She leaned on the counter, her expression curious but not unkind. "My name's Eleanor. I run this place." "Clara." "Just Clara?" "Just Clara." Eleanor nodded, accepting the answer. "What brings you to Pine Ridge, just Clara?" "My grandmother," Clara said, the words coming out before she could stop them. "She used to talk about this place." Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "Your grandmother? Who was she?" "Maeve Connolly." The coffee pot in Eleanor's hand paused in midair. She set it down slowly. A wide, astonished smile spread across her face. "Maeve? Maeve and Thomas?" Clara blinked, surprised. "You knew them?" "Knew them? Honey, Thomas Harmon built half the things in this diner. That counter you're leaning on? That was his work. So are the booths. He was an artist with wood." Suddenly, the dovetailed cabinets in the camper made a new kind of sense. "They lived up on the old Miller place for a few years, back before you were born," Eleanor continued, her voice warm with reminiscence. "Happiest couple I ever saw. Quiet, kept to themselves mostly, but good people, solid people. Thomas could fix anything, and Maeve could make anything grow." She looked past Clara, out the window at the hulking shape of the camper. "That camper was his passion project. Brought it here as a wreck and spent 2 years rebuilding it from the frame up. Said it was their escape hatch, their just-in-case plan." "Just in case of what?" Clara asked. Eleanor's smile faded slightly. "Life, I suppose. They had to leave in a hurry. Maeve's sister got sick, the one back east. They packed up and left, always said they'd be back." She sighed. "Never saw them again. I heard Thomas passed away not long after." Clara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "And my grandmother, she passed last week." Eleanor reached across the counter and placed a warm, dry hand over Clara's. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." The simple, genuine sympathy was almost Clara's undoing. She fought back a surge of tears. "The camper. It's all I have left of them," she whispered. Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Well, a legacy from Thomas Harmon is a damn fine thing to have, no matter what it looks like on the outside. That man never built anything that wasn't meant to last forever." She let go of Clara's hand and turned to the grill. "You look like you could use a real breakfast. On the house. For Maeve's granddaughter." As Eleanor cooked, she talked. She told Clara stories about her grandparents, about the time Thomas had rescued the church steeple after a lightning strike, about the legendary strawberry jam Maeve used to make. Each story was a small, bright piece of a puzzle Clara didn't even know she was missing. She was learning about her own history from a stranger in a diner, 1,000 miles from everything she had ever known. She wasn't just the girl whose grandmother died. She was Thomas and Maeve's granddaughter. She was part of a story. She ate the best pancakes she had ever tasted and drank 3 cups of coffee. For the first time in a week, she felt something other than grief or fear. She felt full. Back in the camper, the dusty air seemed less oppressive. The gloom felt less final. Eleanor's stories had been a key, unlocking a new way of seeing the space. This wasn't a tomb. It was a time capsule. She began to clean. Not a deep clean, just a surface-level attack on the thickest layers of dust and grime. As she worked, she continued her exploration. In the small sleeping area at the very back, there was a bed platform with a thin, stained mattress. Clara wrinkled her nose and heaved the mattress out the door. Underneath, the platform was made of the same beautiful oak as the floor. And there was something else. A small brass ring, flush-mounted into one of the planks. It was almost invisible, covered in dust. Her heart gave a little thump. She hooked a finger through the ring and pulled. A section of the platform lifted up, revealing a shallow, hidden compartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark velvet, was a book. It was a thick, leather-bound ledger, the kind accountants used to use. On the cover, embossed in faded gold leaf, were 2 words, "The Silver Stream." Her hands trembled as she lifted it out. It was heavy, solid. It smelled of leather and old paper, and her grandfather. She sat on the edge of the dusty bed platform and opened it. The first page was a simple, elegant drawing of the camper. Beneath it, in neat, architectural handwriting, was a date. June 14th, 1998. Project log. She turned the page. Entry 1. Acquired the patient. A 1978 Silver Stream, 31 foot. A victim of neglect and a hailstorm in Nebraska. Frame seems sound, but the skin is shot and the interior is a horror show of cheap 70s plastic. Maeve thinks I'm crazy. She's probably right. But I see the bones of it. The bones are good. Clara smiled. She could almost hear his voice, the low, rumbling chuckle she remembered from her childhood. She kept turning the pages. The book was a meticulous, obsessive record of the camper's rebirth. Every single repair, every modification was detailed. There were wiring diagrams sketched in perfect scale, complicated plumbing schematics, notes on wood finishes and load-bearing calculations. It was a master craftsman's Bible, but it was more than that. Woven in between the technical notes were personal entries. Entry 47. Finished the galley cabinets today. Dovetailed cherry. Maeve came in and ran her hand over the joints and just smiled. That was all the thanks I needed. She brought me a glass of iced tea and we sat on the steps in the sunset. A good day. Entry 112. The wiring is a nightmare. Some fool in Indiana in 1978 decided this mess was a good idea. Ripping it all out. Starting from scratch. Going to run separate circuits for everything. 12-volt DC system for the basics, with a heavy-duty inverter for a 110 AC line. Overkill? Probably. But if you're going to do a thing, do it right. Entry 204. Laid the last plank of the oak floor today. Took me a month. Each piece cut and planed by hand. Maeve says it's too nice for a camper. I told her nothing is too nice for her. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. This book wasn't just a log. It was a love letter to his wife, and a love letter to the work itself. She kept reading, losing track of time. The sun dipped below the pines, and the interior of the camper grew dim. She read about the custom-built water tanks, the hidden insulation, the secret compartments, plural, he had built in. Then she found the entry that made her stop breathing. Entry 315. Thinking about the future today. About Clara. She's so small, so full of light. The world can be a hard place for a light like that. I hope she never needs this place. I hope her life is easy and full of love. But if it's not, if the world ever gets complicated for her like it did for us, I want her to have this. A place that's safe. A place that's hers. A place built to last. I'm putting a second water tank in the undercarriage, just for her. A secret reservoir. A person should always have a secret reservoir. A single tear escaped and fell onto the page, making the ink blur. He had built this for her, not just for him and Maeve, for her. This wasn't just a camper. It wasn't just a cabin. It was a lifeboat, and her grandfather had built it with his own 2 hands. Clara closed the book and held it to her chest. The weight of it was a comfort. The hard corners dug into her arms. It was real. The despair that had been her constant companion for weeks was gone. In its place was a feeling so new and fragile, she was afraid to name it. It felt like a purpose. She looked around the dusty, silent space. It wasn't a ruin. It was a project. Her project. A thing isn't ruined. It's just waiting for the right pair of hands. That night, for the first time since her grandmother died, Clara slept a deep and dreamless sleep. She didn't wedge the door shut. She was no longer afraid. She was home. The work began the next morning. Armed with the knowledge in the ledger, Clara started with the most pressing issue, water. The main tank was empty, and according to the journal, the pump needed a new gasket. She found the section in the ledger. Thomas had drawn a perfect diagram of the pump assembly. He had even listed the part number for the gasket. Standard part, he had written. Any decent auto shop should have one. Clara walked into town. The morning air was crisp and smelled of pine. She passed the landing, and Eleanor gave her a wave from the window. Clara waved back, a small smile on her face. The town's only other commercial establishment of note was Gus's Garage and Hardware. It was a low-slung building with a faded sign and 2 service bays. A large, gruff-looking man with a grease-stained beard was wrestling with the tire of a pickup truck. Clara hesitated. He looked intimidating. She took a breath and walked up to him. "Excuse me?" He grunted without looking up. "If it's about the Henderson job, it'll be ready when it's ready." "No, I need a part." He finally straightened up and looked at her. His eyes, surprisingly, were a clear, intelligent blue. "What kind of part?" She held out the piece of paper where she had written the number from the journal. "It's a gasket, for a water pump." He took the paper and squinted at it. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. "Sureflow 2088. Haven't seen one of those in a while. What's it for?" "A 1978 Silverstream camper," she said. The man's head snapped up. He stared at her, then past her, toward the gravel lot where the camper was parked. "You're in Thomas Harmon's rig?" he asked, his voice suddenly low and respectful. Clara was taken aback. "Yes, he was my grandfather." The man wiped a greasy hand on a rag and extended it to her. "Gus, I'm Gus. I knew your grandfather. He taught me everything I know about engines." Clara shook his hand. His grip was firm and calloused. "He was a great man," Gus said, his eyes still on the camper. "A true craftsman. I was just a kid, a dumb grease monkey. He'd come in here for some odd bolt or another and see me struggling. He'd just show me, patiently. Never made me feel stupid." He looked back at the paper in his hand. "A gasket. Yeah, I think I have one in the back. Come on in." He led her into the cool, cluttered dark of the hardware store. It smelled of oil and metal and sawdust. He disappeared into a back room filled with shelves of dusty boxes. After a moment of clattering, he emerged, holding a small, black rubber ring. "Here you go," he said, placing it in her hand. "How much do I owe you?" Clara asked, reaching for her wallet. Gus waved his hand. "Nothing. Consider it a down payment on the debt I owe your grandfather. You need anything else for that rig, you come see me. Anything at all." He then looked her up and down, taking in her worn clothes and the tired look in her eyes. "You know," he said, his voice casual, "I could use some help around here. Sweeping up, organizing shelves, answering the phone. Nothing glamorous. But it's $10 an hour under the table." Clara stared at him, speechless. A job. He was offering her a job. Yes, she stammered. "Yes, I'll take it." "Good," he said with a nod. "Start tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp." Clara walked back to the camper with the small gasket clutched in her hand. It felt like a jewel. She had a part. She had a job. She had an ally. The world was starting to feel a little less complicated. Fixing the pump was harder than she expected. The space was tight. The bolts were rusted. Her knuckles were scraped and bleeding by the time she was done. But she followed her grandfather's diagram, and when she finally flipped the switch, she heard the hum of the motor, followed by the beautiful, gurgling sound of water filling the pipes. She turned the faucet in the galley. After a sputter of air, a stream of clear, cold water poured into the sink. Clara laughed. A real, out-loud laugh of triumph. She had running water. It was a small victory. But it was hers. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the garage, sweeping floors and learning the arcane language of spark plugs and fan belts from Gus. Afternoons at the camper, working her way through her grandfather's journal. The work was slow, methodical. Each task was a new challenge. She tackled the electrical system. The journal warned her it was a mess, and it was. A tangled nest of brittle, cracked wires. Following Thomas's pristine diagrams, she pulled it all out. Every last wire. Gus let her buy new wiring from him at cost. He showed her how to strip the ends and use a crimping tool. Thomas would want it done right, he'd grumble, peering over her shoulder. She spent a week on her back in the cramped spaces under the cabinets, running new lines. Her arms ached, her neck was stiff. But when she was done, she flipped a switch, and the original, beautiful brass light fixtures her grandfather had installed flickered to life, casting a warm, golden glow. Progress. Small but real. One afternoon, as she was wrestling with a stubborn window frame, a shadow fell over her. She looked up to see Eleanor from the diner, holding a large wicker basket. "Thought you might be hungry," Eleanor said, handing her the basket. It was filled with a whole roasted chicken, a loaf of bread, and a jar of what looked like strawberry jam. "Maeve's recipe," Eleanor said with a wink. Clara felt a familiar lump in her throat. "Thank you. You don't have to do this." "Nonsense," Eleanor said, peering at the camper. "You're bringing this old girl back to life. It's the least we can do. The whole town is rooting for you, you know." It was true. People had started to stop by. The old men from the diner would wander over with cups of coffee and offer unsolicited, usually terrible, advice. A woman named Mary, who ran the small post office, brought her a set of hand-sewn curtains. "The old ones were so dreary," she said shyly. Each person had a story about Thomas or Maeve. Each contribution was another thread weaving her into the fabric of this strange, quiet town. She was no longer just a girl with a camper. She was part of Pine Ridge. She was fixing the camper. And the camper, in turn, was fixing her. One evening, a scruffy, rain-soaked terrier mix appeared at her door. It was skinny and shivering, with one ear flopped over and a hopeful look in its eyes. Clara sighed, consulted her dwindling supply of food, and shared her dinner. The dog never left. She named him Rusty. He would lay on a rag rug by the door while she worked, a silent, watchful companion. His presence made the empty camper feel less so. He was another stray, finding a home. If you've made it this far into Clara's story, hit subscribe, because what happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you. With the basics of water and electricity handled, Clara turned her attention to the exterior. The rust. It was the camper's most glaring flaw. The journal was, as always, her guide. Entry 184. The aluminum skin is pitted and oxidized. Standard polishing won't be enough. We'll need to sand it down to the bare metal. A long, tedious job, but worth it. Underneath all that grime, this thing wants to shine. Have to remove the rubbing strips first. The vinyl inserts are shot. I'll need to fabricate new ones. Maybe from a strip of teak. That would look sharp. Sanding the entire 31-foot camper by hand was a monumental task. Clara bought sandpaper from Gus, starting with a coarse grit and working her way down to a fine one. For weeks, her life was the rhythmic scrape of paper on metal. Her arms and back ached. Her hands were raw. The fine metallic dust coated her clothes, her hair, her skin. But slowly, miraculously, the shine began to return. The dull, oxidized gray gave way to a soft, satiny luster. The camper seemed to emerge from a cocoon of neglect. It started to look less like a wreck and more like what it was, a classic. Gus came by one afternoon, a can of soda in his hand. He walked a slow circle around the camper, a look of grudging admiration on his face. "Damn, kid," he said. "You got your grandfather's stubbornness. I'll give you that." He pointed to the long, ugly dent that ran down the side. "What are you going to do about that?" Clara looked at the dent. It had been bothering her. It was the one major flaw in the otherwise perfect skin. "I don't know. The journal doesn't say anything about dents." "That's because Thomas never would have dented it," Gus said with a grin. "But I know how to fix it. We can pull it. Bring it by the shop on Saturday." That Saturday, The town seemed to turn out for the event. Gus welded a series of metal tabs to the dent. He attached a slide hammer. The old men from the diner gathered at a safe distance, offering commentary. Eleanor brought a pitcher of lemonade. With a series of loud, percussive bangs, Gus pulled the dent. It wasn't perfect, but the ugly gash was gone, replaced by a much shallower, smoother depression. It was a celebration. It was a barn-raising, camper style. As Clara stood there, surrounded by these near strangers who had become her friends, her family, she felt a sense of belonging so powerful, it almost hurt. This was home, this community, this strange, beautiful silver vessel. She was polishing the final section of the camper's nose, bringing it to a mirror shine, when the black Mercedes pulled into the gravel lot. It looked alien here, a sleek and predatory creature amidst the pines and pickup trucks. Clara's stomach tightened. The driver's side door opened, and a woman in a crisp beige pantsuit and expensive sunglasses stepped out. Even without seeing her face, Clara knew. Aunt Susan. Susan took off her sunglasses and surveyed the scene. Her eyes swept over the gleaming camper, the neatly stacked firewood, the pot of geraniums Eleanor had given Clara. Her perfectly made-up face was a mask of disbelief, which quickly curdled into something else. Greed. "Well, well," Susan said, her voice a sharp, intrusive sound in the quiet afternoon. "Look what you've been up to. Quite the little project." Clara didn't say anything. She just stood there, polishing cloth in hand, Rusty growling softly at her feet. "We heard you'd done some work on it," Susan continued, walking closer. Her expensive shoes crunched on the gravel. "My lawyer ran a check. Apparently these old things are quite valuable now. To collectors." She ran a manicured finger along the polished aluminum. "Amazing what a little elbow grease can do. What do you want, Susan?" Clara's voice was low and steady. It didn't tremble. She surprised herself. "What's fair, Clara? What's fair?" Susan said, turning to face her. "Clearly, this camper is worth far more than its assessed value. It's an asset of the estate. It should have been sold, the proceeds used to pay my sister's debts." "The lawyer said it passed to me directly," Clara said. "A legal loophole. An oversight," Susan snapped, "based on a fraudulent valuation. This is a classic vehicle. It could be worth $50,000, maybe $60,000. It's certainly not worth $500,000. She was right, of course. It was worth more, far more, but not in the way she thought. Its value wasn't in dollars. It was in dovetailed joints and hand-planed floors. It was in the love and labor of a man she had scorned. "We're prepared to be generous," Susan said, her voice shifting to a tone of cloying reasonableness. "We will reimburse you for the money you've spent on materials. $1,000, say. And then we will take possession of the camper and sell it, as your grandmother would have wanted." "No," Clara said. The word was quiet, but it hung in the air like a solid object. Susan's eyes narrowed. "Don't be foolish, Clara. You can't win this. I have a lawyer. I have a claim. You are living in an asset that belongs to my sister's estate." "You're wrong," Clara said. She walked to the door of the camper and stepped inside, leaving Susan fuming in the gravel. She returned a moment later, holding the leather-bound ledger. She opened it to a page near the back. "This camper was purchased as salvage," Clara read, her voice clear and strong. "The original vehicle, a 1978 Silver Stream, VIN number ending in 482, was declared a total loss by the insurer. I purchased the frame and title only. Everything else, the skin, the interior, the systems, was built by my grandfather, by hand." She turned a page where a notarized document was carefully taped in. "This is a bill of sale, for the original frame, for $200. And this," she pointed to another line item in her grandfather's neat script, "is a log of every single part he bought and every hour of labor he put in. He estimates his total investment at over 2,000 hours." She looked up and met her aunt's furious gaze. "This isn't a 1978 Silver Stream," Clara said. "It's a 2001 Harman, custom built. My grandfather titled it as a homemade vehicle. The title is in my grandmother's name, and she left it to me in her will. It has a different VIN number. Your claim is on a vehicle that hasn't existed for 20 years. All the color drained from Susan's face. She stared at the book in Clara's hands as if it were a snake. "You're lying," she hissed. "Am I?" Clara asked calmly. From the direction of the garage, a new voice cut in. "She's not lying." Gus was walking toward them, wiping his hands on a rag. Eleanor was right behind him. The old men from the diner were trailing them, a small army of flannel-clad protectors. "I was there when he finished it," Gus said, stopping beside Clara. "I helped him tow it to the DMV for the inspection. It's a Harman, all right. One of a kind." Susan looked from Gus's grease-stained face to Eleanor's stern one. She looked at the silent, watching men. She looked at the gleaming, magnificent camper. And she looked at Clara, standing tall and unafraid, holding the book of truth in her hands. She was beaten, and she knew it. With a strangled noise of pure rage, Susan turned on her heel, got back in her Mercedes, and tore out of the gravel lot, spitting rocks in her wake. The silence she left behind was deep and peaceful. Eleanor put an arm around Clara's shoulders. "You did good, kid." Clara leaned into her warmth, the heavy ledger still clutched in her hands. She had stood her ground. She had protected her home. She had protected her grandfather's legacy. The house held. No, not the house. The camper. The camper held. A few weeks later, another car pulled into the lot. This one was not a Mercedes. It was a dented Honda Civic with a mismatched fender. Her cousin Mark got out. He looked different, thinner. The easy arrogance he used to wear was gone, replaced by a kind of hollowed-out shame. "Clara," he said. He didn't meet her eyes. Clara was sanding a piece of teak for the new rubbing strips. She didn't stop. "Mark." "Mom told me what happened," he said, kicking at a loose piece of gravel. She's pretty mad." "I'm sure she is," Clara said, her voice neutral. He was quiet for a long time. Clara continued to sand, the rhythmic motion a comforting meditation. "I'm sorry," he finally said. The words were so quiet she almost missed them. "I should have said something, when she was kicking you out. It wasn't right." Clara stopped sanding. She looked at him, really looked at him. He looked like a lost kid. "No," she said. "It wasn't. Things aren't going so great," he admitted. "I had to drop out of school. Couldn't afford it. Got a job at a warehouse. It sucks." He finally looked up at her, and his eyes were full of a misery she recognized. "You landed on your feet, though. You built this. It's amazing." He looked at the piece of teak in her hand. "What's that for?" "It's for the trim," she said. "I'm replacing the old vinyl inserts." He reached out a hesitant hand. Can I help?" Clara looked at his soft, uncalloused hands. She looked at the desperation in his eyes. He wasn't his mother. He was just weak and lost. She thought about her grandfather. He wouldn't have turned away someone who needed help. He wouldn't have held a grudge. He would have put a tool in their hand. She handed Mark a block of sandpaper. "Sand with the grain," she said. "Not against it." He worked with her for the rest of the afternoon, in silence. His work was clumsy at first, but he listened. He learned. When the sun started to set, he stood up, his back stiff. "I should go," he said. "Okay," Clara said. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for anything. He just got in his broken car and drove away. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something. A small act of restoration. A piece of the past, sanded smooth. That night, with the work on the camper nearly complete, Clara felt restless. She had polished the exterior, rebuilt the systems, and cleaned every inch of the interior. It was beautiful. It was safe. It was hers. But there was still a piece of the puzzle she couldn't place, a question that the journal hadn't fully answered. Why had her grandparents left Pine Ridge? Eleanor said it was because a sister was sick. But the journal spoke of leaving in a hurry, of the world getting complicated. It felt like there was more to the story. She sat at the cherry dinette and opened the ledger again. She had read it cover to cover a dozen times, but she felt like she had missed something. She ran her fingers over the pages, over her grandfather's neat, steady handwriting. She traced the diagrams and the sketches. Her fingers paused on the inside of the back cover. The leather there felt different, thicker, less flexible. She tapped it. It was hard, like there was something behind it. With a small knife from the galley, she carefully, painstakingly, worked at the seam where the leather met the cardboard backing. The glue was old and brittle. It gave way. Slowly, she peeled back the leather. There was a shallow, perfectly carved recess in the book's cover, and in it there was a thin bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was it, the final secret. The handwriting on the top envelope was not her grandfather's. It was a delicate, feminine script, and it was addressed to her grandmother, Maeve. The postmarks were from 20 years ago. With trembling hands, she untied the ribbon and unfolded the first letter. "Dearest Maeve," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well. I'm sorry for the silence. It's been hard. I think of you and Thomas often, up there in your quiet mountain paradise. I know you must hate me. I know you think I abandoned her." Clara's breath hitched. Her. You have to understand. He wouldn't let me keep her. He said I wasn't fit, that I was too young, too unstable. He said he would ruin me, ruin us both, if I tried to fight him for custody. And I believed him. He had the money, the lawyers, the power. I had nothing. I know it was a lot to ask, to take her in, to raise your granddaughter as your own daughter because her own mother was a coward. But you did it. You gave her a safe and loving home when I couldn't. You and Thomas are saints. I see pictures sometimes, the ones you send through the lawyer. She's beautiful. She looks like him, but she has my eyes. Does she know about me? Do you tell her I love her? I'm doing better now. I finished my degree. I have a good job. I'm saving money. One day, when I'm strong enough, I'm going to come for her. I promise. All my love, Lily. Lily. Her mother's name was Lily. Clara sank onto the dinette bench, the letter shaking in her hand. All her life, the story had been simple. Her mother had been young. She couldn't handle being a parent. She had left Clara on her parents' doorstep and disappeared. An act of selfishness, an abandonment. But it wasn't simple at all. It was complicated. She had not been abandoned. She had been protected. Her grandparents hadn't just taken her in. They had fled with her. They had left their happy life in Pine Ridge, their home, their friends, to hide her from a man with money and power. Her father. The camper wasn't an escape hatch. It was a getaway car. It all clicked into place. The hurried departure. The just-in-case plan. The secret reservoir. It was all for her, to keep her safe. She read the other letters. They told a story of a young woman struggling, fighting, trying to get her life together so she could get her daughter back. The last letter was dated a year after the first. "Maeve, I'm so sorry. He found me. I don't know how. He threatened me. He said if I ever contacted you or Clara again, he would make sure I lost my job, my apartment, everything. He said he would take Clara and I would never see her again. I can't risk that. I have to disappear. For her sake. Please, don't tell her any of this. Let her think I left because I didn't love her. It's better than her knowing the truth. It's better than her being afraid. Tell her I was a ghost. A story. Please. For me. For her. Goodbye. Lily." Clara sat in the quiet camper, the letters spread out before her like fallen leaves. The story of her life, rewritten. The anger she had carried for her absent mother, a cold, hard stone in her heart, dissolved. It was replaced by a vast, aching sorrow. For the young woman who had tried and failed. For the grandparents who had sacrificed everything. For the little girl who had grown up believing she was unloved. She wasn't unloved. She was so loved, it had broken everyone around her. She looked around the camper, at the dovetailed cabinets and the hand-planed floors, at the warm glow of the brass lamps. This was not just a monument to craftsmanship. It was a fortress of love, built to withstand the world. Clara carefully folded the letters and retied the blue ribbon. She did not put them back in their hiding place. She put them in the ledger, alongside her grandfather's words. The stories belonged together. The next day, she did something she had never thought she would do. She went to the small-town library. Using their public computer, she began to search. Lily, her mother's name, and the name of the man from the letters, her father. She didn't know his name, but the letters gave her clues. A city, a profession. It took hours. It felt like searching for a ghost. But then she found him. A wealthy real estate developer in a city 3 states away. He was older now, with a new wife, new children, a whole new life. And then she found her. Lily. She had a different last name now. She was a landscape architect. She lived in a small city just a few hours' drive from Pine Ridge. She had her own firm. Clara stared at the picture on the company's website. A woman with a kind, tired smile. And her eyes. She has my eyes. Clara printed the page, the address, the phone number. She sat in her car outside the library, the paper trembling in her hand. What now? Call? Drive there? Show up on her doorstep? What would she even say? She drove back to the camper. She sat at the dinette, the piece of paper on the table in front of her. Rusty put his head in her lap, sensing her turmoil. She thought about her grandmother, Maeve. She thought about her grandfather, Thomas. They had acted. They had done what needed to be done to protect her. Now it was her turn. She took out a piece of paper and a pen. She began to write. "Dear Lily," she wrote, "you don't know me. My name is Clara. I believe you are my mother." She didn't write about anger or abandonment. She didn't make demands. She just stated the facts. My grandmother Maeve passed away recently. She left me my grandfather's camper. I found your letters. I'm in a town called Pine Ridge. I'm okay. I'm safe. I don't know what you want. I don't know what I want. But I thought you should know. She folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and wrote the address. Sending the letter was an act of faith, a message in a bottle. It didn't matter if she got a response. What mattered was that she had taken control of her own story. She was no longer just a passive character in a tragedy written by others. She was the author now. The camper was finished. The teak trim was installed, oiled to a soft sheen. The windows were polished. The new curtains hung. The exterior gleamed, a silver beacon in the pines. Inside, it was a home. The oak floors glowed. The cherry cabinets were filled with plates and food. A small bookshelf, built by Clara from scrapwood, was filled with her books. She gave it a final tour, a quiet inspection. She ran her hand over the smooth, cool butcher block countertop her grandfather had installed. She tested the faucet, watching the clean, steady stream of water. She flipped a switch, and the warm light from the brass lamps filled the space. Everything worked. Everything was solid. Everything was right. It was a real house, a complete home. She had established routines, work at Gus's in the morning, a shared lunch with Eleanor at the landing, afternoons for her own projects, for reading, for walking with Rusty in the woods. She had a life, a good life, a quiet life. One evening, she sat on the newly built steps of the camper, a mug of tea in her hands. Rusty was asleep at her feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was cool and smelled of pine and damp earth. It was peaceful. She felt a deep, quiet contentment she had never known before. It wasn't a loud, flashy happiness. It was a sturdy, foundational peace. The kind of peace that comes from building something with your own two hands. She had arrived in Pine Ridge broken and adrift, a girl with nothing but a rusted piece of junk and a heart full of holes. Now she was whole. She was rooted. The camper had been her salvation. But it was more than that. It was her inheritance. Not the monetary value, but the legacy of resilience, of craftsmanship, of love. A thing isn't ruined. It's just waiting for the right pair of hands. Her hands. A car was coming up the dirt road, a small, sensible sedan. It pulled into the lot and parked a respectful distance away. The driver's side door opened. A woman got out. She was holding a single piece of paper, a letter. She had a kind, tired smile, and Clara's eyes. She took a hesitant step forward, then another. Clara stood up. She didn't know what would happen next. There might be tears. There might be anger. There might be a difficult, complicated conversation that would last for hours. Or there might be a new beginning. She took a breath and walked down the steps to meet her. The door to the camper was open. The light was on. The camper held.